important thing to wear is your eyeglasses. You want to have eye protection because you're up high. And also one of the things that you don't want to do is you always want to make an undercut, okay? And this allows you to cut from the top, but you want to make an undercut so you don't do a bark tear. And we have an example of a bark tear over there.
This one?
That's that one.
So this is where somebody, when they were making the cut, they actually tore part of the bark off.
They didn't make the cut from the bottom first, and they followed through with the uppercut, and what happened was it tore when the branch gave.
And so that's another entrance for the disease and the insects to get in.
And that's hard to compartmentalize. And we give a demonstration on this one right here. Before we get to this cut, our last cut, we make our first undercut here with the saw, then we make the finished cut here, and that lightens the load of the branch. I'll let you hold that.
So that way, you kind of just cut off the excess first.
Cut off the excess first.
And then you're not putting the strain on the branch, and it's not tearing the bark off.
And I'd still suggest that before you make this last cut, you still do an undercut, and then finish the cut with a good saw.
Well, how do you know which branches you need to cut off?
Good question. We're looking for, and we'll step over here. We're looking for good scaffolding on the tree. And so we want good lateral branches all the way around the tree. We're looking for a dominant leader. And you can see the two leaders are just about running neck and neck. And early in one's career, you want to take out one so they're not in competition with each other.
So this is what you don't want, two of about the same size going up.
So which one of these would you keep?
I would have probably pruned this one much earlier. I would have kept this one, and I would have taken out this one. And again, you want to make a cut, and you're also eliminating cross branches, and you'll see some cross branches in here. And one of the reasons you want to eliminate the cross branches is because when the winds blow and the branches rub together, you're creating a wound that the pathogens are going to enter again. And that's one thing you want to avoid.
No, I know a lot of people like to use like a wound sealant when they do pruning trees. How important is that?
It's not really that important because in most instances, and we have some sealant there, in most instances it will interfere with the compartmentalization process. But we're starting to see a fungus hit oak trees in our area called oak wilt. Then you might want to put it on an oak tree wound, so it enables the to protect that wound from the pathogen invading that. Also, one of the things that may help to prevent oak wilt is to be sure you do all your pruning when the tree's dormant. And again, we're back to that thing where the fungal pathogens aren't active to invade. And you plan for your pruning. And it's not like sometimes where we need an emergency appendectomy and we don't have the 6 months to plan ahead. And some of the very inexpensive books, like that one, is only $12. And it'll tell you each tree when to prune a magnolia. And a magnolia is one of the exceptions where you prune after it flowers because the wounds don't compartmentalize very well. It's very, very soft wood.
Well, in general, when is the dormant period for the deciduous trees here in Northeast Ohio?
Okay. They don't know how to read a calendar. So you look for them to lose their leaves in about 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the weather. And then that's your key to go. Do
you ever want to do it early in the spring, or do you run the risk that they're starting to bud and maybe you're going to mess that up?
Some trees you do. And again, I'd refer to a book on that because, again, most of the trees you do want to prune when they're dormant.
Like a lot of people ask about roses. Is there a best time to prune your roses?
I take them to about knee-high in the fall. And the most important thing is I mulch very well with hardwood mulch about a foot above the ground, covering that bud union. And then I make my finishing cuts in the spring. And I take them down to about 6 to 8 inches. And again, we're back to, let me show you this little thing. I'll let you hold it up there. You want to make your cuts on an angle like that. And I'm going about 1/4 of an inch above a lateral leaf leaf bud there. Yeah, that's a leaf bud. And that little ring around it is called a node. And there's usually one of those lateral buds just above the node there. But you always want to make your cuts on an angle.
Why do you want to make them at an angle?
Good question. So that when water hits them, you hope that it's going to roll off. Now, a question about what do you paint on roses? You didn't ask that. I'll answer that. That's one where there's a number of products. Something you probably have on already is Elmer's glue. And what you're doing is, if you've probably ever seen little holes in the end of the branches. That's done by a little insect called a lesser carpenter bee. And he drills a hole in there, lays his larvae, and the lesser carpenter bee really doesn't hurt it. And in fact, we have so few pollinators left out. Leave him alone, he's a good guy.
Okay.
If it's not broken, don't fix it.
Now we have just a couple minutes left, but could you give us an example of maybe some good pruning techniques on the trees that you brought in?
Okay. I'm going to step over here, and I'm looking for the cross branches first. And now that you're an expert, you know that that's a cross branch.
Yeah, these are rubbing together, and they're going to rub the bark off.
And I'm probably going to make my cut right there, taking that off.
And you'd use a bypass pruner rather than an anvil pruner for something
I
like this?
prefer, yeah. And I'm going to clean that cut up a little bit too. And the difference between an anvil pruner and a bypass pruner is with a bypass I'm making a clean shearing cut, but with an anvil I'm crushing it on the bottom, so that's my weapon of choice. We'll dispose of that down here. Also, what we want to do is move out any little broken branches like this. And again, I'd make my cut on an angle, and I'd find just above a bud node, and I'm looking for a bud break. Now, one of the other reasons that I don't want to take out more than 25%, I need you to hold these, is that all of a sudden when we make a cut like that, you want to hold that up, those lateral branches are going to develop some poor branching called water spouts. And that's something that you don't want to create. And if you take out too much at one time, you're going to get those water spouts. And that's exactly what they look like. Now, you had asked earlier about some of the other kind of suckers. And right over here, we have an example, and that's very common among fruit trees, of basal suckers. And that's coming out from the side of the trunk and from the base.
And so you just want to take those all the way down to the
You
branch?
want to take those all the way down. And some trees are more predisposed to that than other trees.
I've seen it on a lot of apple trees and pear trees where it's like grafted.
Absolutely.
Well, Monty Clayton, we want to thank you very much for coming in, giving us some basics on pruning. You'll find more information in the books that we have to offer. And we'll be back later with some more tips to make your garden the best in the neighborhood.
Pruning. You know, Maureen, this is one of the most important things I think that people can learn. People are afraid to do it, and it's so critical to bushes and trees and plants to keep them looking good.
And not only does it help keep it look good, it's it's like getting a good haircut. Even if you don't like it when you get done, it's going to grow back.
And that's what you're right. You go into some of these plants, when you start taking the stuff out, you can't believe what you're pulling out of them.
Yeah, and sometimes you just I know I'm like this. I'm so afraid to do it, and then when I do it, it looks so much better.
Right.
And even if you so what if you cut a little too much here or what? It'll grow back.
You're absolutely right. It does grow back, and it grows back more full and more beautiful than it did to begin with. So you might have one season that you're saying, did I do it right? That by the next year you'll be so happy that you've done it. And then if you continue with your pruning year to year, it'll always look terrific. So that first year when you first try to get things back to the way they should be, might be a little unnatural, but you'll find that it's terrific for the investment in your property. Now, questions on pruning are all over this wonderful book because, as you can imagine, with as important as it is, the Cleveland Botanical Garden was always receiving questions about various types of pruning. And when you get to this book, you'll find that there's lots and lots of questions asked about pruning different kinds of trees and bushes.
As a matter of fact, right here it says on page 69, when can I prune my forsythia? Forsythia is one of those landscape plants that gets used a lot, especially in new subdivisions when they come in and make recommendations about what to put in and put together this whole package. You often have forsythia. It says the best time is just after it blooms. Remove all the old woody growth and weak distorted branches. Thin the plant so that light can penetrate to the bottom. Aha, I think that's what's wrong with mine. It's really too thick and bushy.
The light can't get to the bottom.
The light can't get to the bottom. And it said, with this pruning approach, you'll create a graceful arching shrub.
And that's what you're after. So go to your telephone right now and get this wonderful book. It will come to you at the $60 level. It's the Gardener's Guide for Northeastern Ohio, put together with from 20 years of expertise and experience of Cleveland Botanical Garden with questions and answers and tips and articles. It's fabulous. At the $90 level, if you call right now, you'll have your choice of 2 different items. The first is the video of the very program you're watching now. So if you were fascinated by that last piece on pruning, that piece will be included in this gardener's guide. You'll be able to reference it every spring, every fall. Just when pruning becomes something on your mind, you can pop this tape in your VCR and find out again about how to do these things. If you'd rather something different at the $90 level, we'll send you the Cleveland Garden Handbook, that wonderful book that was put together with tips and ideas from month to month work in your garden from experts all over northeastern Ohio. But why not just jump right to the $180 level, and then we will send you this wonderful green package of the Gardener's Guide to Northeastern Ohio, the home video, the program that you're watching, and the Cleveland Garden Handbook. It will all come your way as our way of saying thank you so much for supporting the programming that you care about. Cast your vote right now for strong programs in this community. If you're a fan of WVIZ PBS, you probably know that we do garden shows. We've done many cooking shows, many cooking shows over the years, and we were looking for other things that would also bring the same kind of sharing in the community that the cooking programs do, and the gardening show is one of those. We have all sorts of ideas, but your telephone calls right now is what helps to affirm the decision. Was this the kind of thing that WVIZ PBS should do? Is this the kind of programming that you individually would like to see more of? And it's your calls and your pledges right now that can make that happen.
You know, and at WVIZ PBS, we're all about education.
Yeah.
And we always talk about how there are the 3 R's of education. Well, when you talk about gardening, especially indoor gardening, there are the 3 P's.
Really?
Pinching, pruning, and potting. And that is in this Cleveland Garden Handbook. It talks about how pinching, because you need to pinch back the old growth and stimulate side buds to grow into branches. You need to do pruning, of course, which we've just been talking about in this last segment. And also potting. When a plant gets pot bound, of course you want to repot it. And make sure that you untangle the roots and replant into fresh soil, and making sure that you don't bury it any deeper. This is important. When you repot, don't bury the plant any deeper or set it any shallower than it had been. It can tell where it was in a container.
Right.
And that's important to
Makes
how the plant thrives from that point on. Again, this is in the Cleveland Garden Handbook. 2nd edition, revised, updated, expanded, because as we've learned a lot about today, gardening is always changing. There are new plants available all the time, as we learned from Petites early on in a segment about brand new perennials and annuals that are available. Science is constantly working on plants, making them hardier. Sometimes there are plants that we now find are available in Northeast Ohio that could never be grown this far north.
Right. Not too long ago, right?
Not too long ago. So this information is in these books. It's in the videotape that's available. You'll want all 3 of them.
And what's been so terrific today, and there's still more to come, is how these experts have come into the WVIZ PBS studios and shared their knowledge with you. That's what it's all about. It's passing on knowledge from experts to people at home, and that's what WVIZ PBS will continue to do with your calls, with your pledges of support. So get to the telephone right now. $60 will bring you that wonderful new handbook that we've put together with the Cleveland Botanical Garden. $90 will bring you your choice of the home video of the Gardener's Guide to Northeastern Ohio or the Cleveland Garden Handbook. But why not just make that $120 pledge to WVIZ PBS today, and we will send you the entire package. The whole thing will come your way as our way of saying thanks for your $180 pledge. You know, questions have been coming in all day long from just people who went out to visit the Home and Garden show here in Cleveland not too long ago. So let's go out there for another one of the wonderful questions.
Hi, I'm Lenore Miller from Menor. When do I prune my clematis?
And here comes another pruning question,
about
Maureen.
clematis this time.
All sorts of them. In fact, it says, and this is on page 53 among lots and lots of pruning questions, but it says most clematis shouldn't need pruning for at least the first year after they're planted. And since you know how much to prune depends on when the plant blooms. Now it says in general, those that bloom between early May and June, and often again in the fall, bloom from old wood. And these can be pruned lightly in late winter or early spring by removing only obviously dead wood or unruly growth. Clematis that bloom from mid-June to fall, those are called summer bloomers, they can be pruned back to 12 to 18 inches in the early spring. And it says failure to prune either type can lead to a top-heavy appearance with no blooms on the bottom of the plant. Similar to what you had said.